see all of you. And on behalf of the International Finance Committee, we hope you all had a wonderful, spectacular holiday. Before we begin the meeting, you need to know that this meeting is being recorded and that the content will be used on the DKG website. By participating, you do agree that your voice and image can appear on that website. I've already asked, but in case you didn't hear me, if you'll please mute yourselves, and that way the one person that is talking hear them real well without any other background sounds going on. Our Peggy Jonas, our International Headquarters Liaison and Finance Director, is going to give us an overview about budgets. Mary Whitten, our committee member, will discuss chapter and state budgets. Diana Haskell, our committee member, will share a summary page with you. And myself, Nancy Davis, I'm the chair of this awesome committee, will go over a reimbursement sheet. You can see what those are like. Glenda Reynolds, committee member, will be our timekeeper, and Sheila Wilkinson, a committee member, will monitor the chat. After each lady has had her part of the program, we'll have a time of question and answer, but we're going to keep that somewhat to a minimum, and then hopefully at the end we'll have time for a question and
I'm muted right now, I think.
Okay, we'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. One thing administratively in the background, Sheila, I just made you a co-host. Do you see that? Sheila Wilkinson?
Yes, I'm here. I'm
You
not
don't see
seeing
it?
that yet, but
Okay.
I will keep looking for it.
Okay, making sure I got everybody admitted. So good morning, welcome. Happy New Year to you all. Glad you could join us. And I'm just going to jump right in with my little PowerPoint here on building budgets. So give me 1 second to get that running. Start show, slideshow. I'm beginning. Sorry, good morning. I'm trying to share my screen here, but it's not on the screen I want it to be, and all that good stuff. I don't know how to...
There it is.
Yeah, is it showing it?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know how to make it not do that because it's limit on the...
Peggy, if you change display settings, I think possibly you can change it.
Yeah, I'm gonna reshare now. I just unplugged my external monitor, so then hopefully, well, I thought it was gonna be right here then. There we go. Now, so now hopefully we're all there and we're seeing a great big DKG Treasurers Talk building a budget. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good morning. We're going to talk about budgeting, usually not anybody's favorite topic. I could always tell when my husband is working on his budget for work because his attitude changes dramatically. So know that I rarely run into anybody that loves budgeting or talking about budgeting, but it's very essential to the organization. When my kids were little, so this will date me, I would, when we were sitting at a restaurant waiting for food, I would break out a piece of paper and we would play hangman. And as they got older, you had to come up with more complicated words. And so budget became one of my favorite ones because grammatically it's kind of a different formation in the English language. So that's always been my little private joke. Budget is not just a good word for playing hangman. And hangman if you aren't familiar with that, is just a little game where you put a word and they guess letters, sort of like Wheel of Fortune kind of thing. And try and guess the word before the figurine is complete. So moving on. The budget is really just a plan. It's the organization's financial plan, and that is why it's so critical to the work that we do, because the financial plan is going to drive so much of what the organization does. Now, keeping that in mind, it is an estimate of your income and your expenditures, and generally what you're trying to do is project what the end of the year is going to look like at the beginning of the year. So remember those two words. That's why I highlighted and underlined them. They're estimates and projections. Rarely does an estimate or a projection come in 100% on target. Some do. I mean, it is possible, but it's very rare once you get the whole thing done that every single line item is going to equal exactly what you thought at the beginning of the year. A lot of people then want to go back and change the budget on that, which is fine, but only change that budget if you can actually control the outcome. If I've already spent the money and the check is already in the mail, there's no point in changing the budget. You did it outside of the plan. However, if I see something coming in 6 months and I know that I didn't budget for it now and that we're going to need to do it, that would be a situation where you want to go in and change that budget and get that approval ahead of time. Is that someone needs to mute, please, because I can hear you in the background. If you have a question or whatever, post it in the chat, raise your hand. I generally prefer to handle questions towards the end so that we can get through the content. But if you feel like I won't remember, or this is really important, go ahead and raise your hand and we will, gladly address it as we move along. So the number one thing when you're looking at a budget in the very beginning is if you take the money you have in the bank now and you add the money you're going to get over the next 12 months or whatever your budget period is, and then you subtract out the expenditures, if you're in a deficit, that means you're projecting you're not going to have enough money to pay your bills. That's an important thing to know. And something that then you need to look at and address as not you, the individual, but you as a chapter, how you're going to handle that. Now, remember, that doesn't mean that you can't have a year where you may not receive as much as you're spending. But if you get that actual total of them, what you have right now in your bank account, what you're going to put into your bank account, and then what you're subtracting from your bank account, that means, quite frankly, you don't have enough money. So that's one of the things that you really need to look at. Some years you may run into a deficit and some years you may run into a surplus. So you may have a year where you tap into your savings account. But if you get all of that money that you have, plus all the money you're going to receive, subtract what you're going to spend, and that's a negative, you don't have enough money. It's just that simple. So that means you've got to change your plan. So if I just look at what I'm getting and what I'm spending, that may be a negative. But if I subtract that from what I already have, if I still have a positive number, then I have enough money to get through the year. Maybe we still need to look at everything because we're spending too much. But that first thing is very critical.
Sorry, that was me.
Okay, no problem.
I'm trying to figure out
So-
how to admit people.
So yeah, I'm not explaining this very well, I feel, and I want to just revisit it 1 second. We start the year with $1,000 in our bank account. We expect to get $10,000 in dues and investment income and whatever. So we now think total available money for the year, the 1,000 we began with, the 10,000 we're collecting, that's 11,000. Now, if I'm spending 8,000, I'm going to have 3,000 at the end of the year. But if I'm spending 12,000, I'm in minus 1,000 at the end of the year. And so you can see where you can't end up with a minus 1,000, at least at my bank. They don't let you do that. So that's the number that I'm talking about. What you have, what you're getting, minus what you're spending. At the end of the day, if that number is less than zero, you you've got to go in and recalculate and figure out some changes and what you need to do to make. So that's kind of the point of this whole exercise to a degree, is do we have enough to do what we need to do this year, or do we need to change the plan? Okay. The next thing, how to build the budget.
Peggy,
Yeah.
excuse the interruption. We've got people waiting and they're not getting in, and I do want to make sure we are recording.
We are recording.
Okay,
And
and
I admitted them.
oh, okay, excuse me. So we're on track.
Yes.
Okay, excuse me. Okay.
All right. And again, for those of you just joining us, you are being recorded. This information will be posted on the DKG website. Your voice and image may appear. So if you do not want your voice or image to appear, then you need to communicate to us via chat, because the chat will not show in the recording, but all conversation, comments, all of that will. Moving forward. Okay, so a lot of people want to make the budget process very complicated, and it can be, but overall, a lot of times, especially in an established organization, where you're going to really start with is looking at what happened previously. What did we do last year? What did we do the year before? And then you look at, okay, now how are those numbers going to change in the next, or in the period that we're budgeting for? So you look at things that, okay, I was off on postage expense. Why was that? Well, it turns out postage went up that last year. And so, you know, we need to now in the new budget account for the fact that the price of stamps has gone up. Or could it be we had a really exceptional year and we sent Christmas cards to everybody, but we're not planning on doing that next year? Then maybe your postage budget will go down. So what I always start with is what happened. In our case, internationally, we work biennially because we have different programs in different years. But the point being, I look at what happened over the past, and then I compare that to what we budgeted, and then I try to understand where it was off and what do I need to tweak. So that, when I'm building a budget, is always where I start. I start with last year's income or statement, and I use that as I fill in my new budget worksheet. Some of the things to consider, unfortunately, one of them is membership decreasing, because one of the things you're budgeting or trying to figure out is what is my dues income going to be for the year? How much am I going to receive from members and dues? So if you've seen that every year we're losing 1 or 2 members, then you kind of have to start to adjust that revenue line down. I can't just say, well, I had 100 members last year, I'll have 100 members this year. If the year before that I had 125 members. So if last year I lost 25 members, do I think I'm going to lose another 25 this year? Those are the kinds of analysis you need to do. And there's no magic answer. There's nobody that can predict for you. If you know them, please introduce me, what exactly is going to happen with your membership for the year. But you can kind of look at the past and see trends. And maybe you're a chapter that's recruiting a lot of people and you got a lot of new life in you and you feel like, gosh, we're getting a lot of new memberships. You may want to say the other direction. You might say, well, last year we got 10 new members and we're hoping this year to get 5 more. So let's budget that way. Personally, when I do that, I always err, when it comes to revenue, always err on the side of underestimating. And when it comes to expenses, always err on the side of overestimating. So, and the reason is I would much rather get to the year and find out I had more income than I thought I was going to, than get to the end of the year and find out I had a lot more expenses than I thought I was going to. So when you're looking at these numbers, if you want to err on the side of conservative when it's things like dues income and investment income and program income, whatever other kinds of income you might have. And when I'm looking at postage, I might want to build an extra 1 or 2% in there, knowing that that there could be an increase in the future. Okay. But the other thing is you can't just look at the past and say, okay, that's what we spent last year, so this is what we're going to do next year. You've also got to look at the future. And this is where this project really becomes collaborative, because the individuals building the budget need to also know what the plans for the organization are for the year. In our case at International, we meet with the president and say, what is it you want to do this biennium? What kinds of programs do you want to run? Which programs do you think weren't effective and you're thinking of cutting back on? Where do you think you might want to save money, and where do you think you might want to spend some extra money? Because that's the hardest part of the budget, honestly, besides the whole, you just don't know exactly what your members are going to do, is knowing that what kinds of things and plans are in process for the coming year. So, and I always say, to me as a treasurer, as a accounting person, this is one of the things I kind of like best. I guess I'm a little nosy, so I get to know what some of the things the president is thinking about. Now, understand that once I have that knowledge, I can't just go out and say, hey, well, the international president said in the budget meeting she's planning on starting a whole new committee, because that's not my place to share or disseminate that information. That is up to the president, but it is my place to make sure that that information is reflected in the budget. All right. Next one, budget approval. This is part of where I call the budget the super shield, because if I am doing everything exactly as we stated at the beginning of the year, according to the budget, no one can come back and say I did something I shouldn't have, because I followed the plan exactly. And once I follow that plan exactly, I have a shield now from anybody that wants to question or criticize, because the budget isn't my plan. The budget was the plan of the organization. It was a plan of the committee or membership that approved that budget. Once it's approved, it's their plan. And as long as you are monitoring, measuring, and managing to that plan, you're shielded as the treasurer from anything else that they may say about that. I mean, I don't care how upset somebody gets that somebody spent $20 on a centerpiece. If that was in the budget, that was in the budget, and their concerns should have been addressed when they voted, not now that we've done it. So the budget and the budget approval are the super shields. So that's one of the reasons that treasurers don't approve the budget. It's either the finance committee or an executive committee or your members. It varies according to chapters and states, but ultimately that approval is critical. And so once you have that, and as long as you're operating within that, you're following the plan. Now they could come back to you and say, we want to change the plan. And if they do that, then you need to go through that process again of preparing the budget, updating the budget, submitting it out, and getting it approved by whoever your approvers are. You need to get it reapproved. Anytime I change a budget item, I go back to those that approved it and make them reapprove it. Okay. Then once you've created and built that budget, and when we get to a little bit later in the presentation this morning, we'll have some example worksheets for you to look at. But the next thing is managing the budget. And so we've now created the budget. It looks beautiful. Our members are excited and happy, and it's been voted on and approved. Well, now you get to the real work in some ways, because now you've got to adhere to that plan. So anytime anytime I make any payment at the international level, now think about this, because there's a lot of payments there. I make sure I know where it belongs in the budget. If I look at a check or a payment or an expense that's going out and I don't know where it goes, then I can't really cut that or issue that payment until I understand where it was in the plan. Glenda, I see you have your hands up. You're muted. Still muted.
It's time.
Oh, okay. so I'm going to go 2 more minutes and I apologize. So, so that's number one. Then the next thing I look at is when I am paying something and it is in the budget, how much did I budget? If I budgeted $10 and it's now $40, I need to look at that and figure out what we're going to do about it. So the next thing is if you have expenditures that aren't in the budget or are going to go over budget, then you need to look at, do we need to go back to our approval process and amend the actual budget? This is where, sorry. This is where, you may have to stop something or someone and say, wait, we don't have approval for that. We don't have authorization for that. We need to go back and get this expense authorized. The other thing to look at always is the income. If you budgeted for 400 members and only 200 actually are joining this year, you've got to go back and fix that budget and change your plan because your revenue just decreased by half. You can't expect to continue with the same programs and same policies if you're only going to have half the income that you anticipated. So you not only monitor what you're spending, but you've also got to keep an eye on what's coming in, because if what's coming in changes radically from what you anticipated, you may have to make some budget changes as well. Now, this could be the opposite. It could be that you got a lot more revenue than you anticipated. And now you need to talk about, do we want to save that for the next period, or there's some programs or something that we'd like to add because we have some more money available. So that's where, you not only are adhering to the plan in terms of expenses, you've also got to be looking at the income side of that. The other half of budget management is reporting the information back to the stakeholders, whether that's your membership or your executive committee or whatever. So you need to look at what's expended and what's received, compare those to the budgets, and know kind of, at least in a general sense, where you are at in your budget process, in your expenditures. That doesn't mean every day you've got to sit down and calculate everything. No, this may be a periodic calculation. But periodically you need to be doing that. You need to take that budget and look at where are we really, what did we think we were going to be, and do we need to make changes? If you need to make changes, again, you're going to go back to that. Do we amend the budget? Is this just a minor thing? And then determine how you're going to make the adjustment. In your reporting, you also remember, I'm sure most chapters and states require that the treasurer prepare a financial statement and report that at chapter meetings, at least periodically. Again, that's part of this budget management process. If your policies and procedures are that the treasurer will present a financial report, 3 times a year, that's part of managing this budget. This is the other one. I get asked at least once a week, I get asked, hey, Peggy, is there money in the budget for XYZ? And if there isn't, I just have to say no. No, there isn't. At times it makes you feel a little bad because somebody is real excited about doing something, or they have a great plan and you think that's an amazing idea, we should be doing that, but it's not in the budget. So it is your job to some degree when you're doing this to say no. I used to have someone say, I get paid a lot of money for saying no. But remember, when you're saying no, your members are counting on it. They're relying on you to follow the plan that you all agreed to. So if you're going outside that plan, then you're letting your members down. You may be making one member really happy, but the rest of them, you let them down a little bit. So while it's not fun to be the no man, that's part of what this process is knowing where you're at and knowing what you can do financially. Dealing with budget anxiety, I always like to talk about this because as treasurers, this is one of the harder things. First of all, the responsibility for the budget is not you as the treasurer or you as a finance committee. It is all of your chapter leaders. They are all responsible for knowing and following and sorry, I just noticed a misspelling, knowing and following the budget. So while a lot of times as treasurers, we think of the budget as ours, it's not ours. it's the chapters. Expenditures outside of the budget are the responsibility of the member who made the purchase. So if someone goes out and buys a bunch of books for something and then comes in and wants to be reimbursed, but that wasn't in the budget, that's not your responsibility. That's the responsibility of the person that made that purchase. The other thing is, it's not your money. It's not your money to spend. It's the chapters to spend. So treasurers really aren't spending the money. They're just paying the bills. The bills are from the budget and the money goes to pay those bills. Those are two different things. And then lastly, budgets are not going to follow 100% every single time because prices change, things change. When I budget airfare or travel for the organization, you can imagine how volatile, as any of you who have traveled lately have been over the year, and how very difficult that is for me to project. And even today, there's no way for me to do that accurately for, say, convention this summer. There's just no way for me to know an accurate amount to put in the budget. So I'm going to put in a very conservative amount, knowing that probably I'm going to be off a little bit. Now, in those instances, I don't go back and get the budget amended unless I know I'm going to be off significantly. For example, when we went to the international training, state officer training over the last two years, we've included a lot more members in that training program. Knowing that we're going to include a lot more people, I had to go back and amend the budget and get approval. But knowing that airfare is going up, unless I know that's consistent and ongoing and all of that, I'm probably not going to go back to amend the budget unless I see we've already spent this year's budget on travel and I still have 6 more months to go. What am I going to do? That's where I need to reconvene that executive committee and talk about what do we do to deal with our issues. Do you see the difference? One is I can't project what's going to happen in June, but if I've already spent my entire year and it's December and I have 6 more months to go, I need to go revisit that. If I'm going to change the program significantly, so what we're reimbursing is dramatically different, I need to change the budget. If I know that airfares are going to continue to increase, I may want to talk about changing the budget, or I may have to take a wait and see approach. This is where the judgment of the treasurer really comes into play, because you're watching those numbers, you're looking at what's going on, and you're seeing some changes in things. You need to exercise your best judgment about, do I really need to amend the budget, or is this really part of or is this really something that is not predictable at this point? So when it comes to actually creating the budget and what you can include or don't include, I recommend the following sort of guidelines. At the international level, we have the International Constitution, the Standing Rules, the Finance Committee guidelines for chapter leaders, and the DKG website. All of those are resources for what can you do, what can't you do. Give me an example of a worksheet, all of those kinds of tools that you need in making decisions. In addition, you have your state and local chapter governing documents and rules. And I can't tell you what those are because they're different state by state. Some have constitutions, some have bylaws, some have charters. The terminology changes, but those are your sources for your when you're looking for, is something permissible, allowed? I need a worksheet. I need to know the organization's policy on travel. Any of those things, start with your governing documents. The other thing that's key in a budget is getting last year's. Start with the last year, the prior 2 years, the prior 10 years, however many years of data you want to use. But that's where you're going to start as a resource for building a budget. All righty. So do we want to discuss question and answers now, Nancy, or do you want to wait until
I just got unmuted. If we could take Sheila, is there a consistent question maybe in the chat that we can address now?
And I will have those slides, all of that available in the base camp. And actually the slides, once I fix that spelling error, will be up. I can have those up in a few days if you felt like you
Sorry.
didn't get to really read the slides.
I actually, there's just one question and I just wanted to bring it up to Peggy because I responded as to what Kentucky does, but the person wanted to know, do you recommend having a miscellaneous line item for on the budget just for unexpected or emergency type expenditures? And I responded and said that Kentucky does have that, just because occasionally things do come up. And also I use that line item. For example, if we decide we're going to take up money for a particular charity, I run the money through the miscellaneous account because I'll deposit it to miscellaneous. And then when I send it out, I'll take it out of that. So
Yes, most organizations have a miscellaneous, and the amount of miscellaneous that you put in or budget is really going to depend on the size of your organization. Obviously, if I'm only generating $10,000 a year in revenue, and then I have a line item of miscellaneous expense of 5,000, well, that's half my revenue. Feels like maybe you're trying to put too much into miscellaneous. On the other hand, it is a good place to have a bit of a buffer so that if that postage goes up and you've got some additional postage expense you weren't expecting, you can use some of the miscellaneous to cover that shortage. I will also give you the auditor's perspective. Auditors know miscellaneous is the place that a lot of people like to hide stuff. So when you have a miscellaneous account, and if you have an auditor, they should be asking questions about it unless the amount is so small. So if I have a huge number in miscellaneous, I can promise you that one of the first questions the auditor is going to ask me is, what is this? Show me the documentation, show me the support. So yes, you should have miscellaneous, but miscellaneous isn't an umbrella for bad deeds. Does that make sense?
Peggy, thank you very much. Mary, let's go to your part of the program, please.
Okay.
And then
So, yep. So Peggy, if you can bring up the sample state planning budget piece. So what I took over finance committee for the state as chair for the state of Maine a number of years ago, and created a spreadsheet, and that's what Peggy's going to bring up. And I'm going to share it with you, and it will be available to you. I noticed this morning when I was looking at it again, I'm going to add a couple more formulas for you just to subtract. And what you'll see in there is the top part of it has our revenue, our receipts, what we call receipts in Maine. And then the bottom part has the expenses. And we go back and we looked at the full year. So the one I set up for you is for 22-23. So we can see exactly what we spent in the 22-23 fiscal year and what we received in the 22-23 fiscal year. And then I also have lines in there for what we budgeted for the current fiscal year, because of course that one's never done when we do budget meeting. And I think I caught a question when I was kind of seeing some of the questions pop up. We usually do our finance committee meeting sometime in the next month or two. We used to wait until after a thing that happened in March, but that's gotten pushed to April. So we're going to probably do it in February because.
excuse me, Mary, they're not seeing, no one is able to see your presentation.
Peggy, you're muted. Peggy's trying to bring it up, I believe, Sheila.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure everyone knew.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, where I have them stored, I have to download them all. What was the name of the document again,
It was
Mary?
called sample state planning budget.
Got it now.
I could speak, it would be helpful.
All right, I apologize. You're gonna have to give me a few minutes. I know we're trying to move through all this quickly and be respectful of your time, but I also have to go find these, download and put them up. So here you go.
Yes, so you can see I have columns for what we spent in 22-23, columns for the 23-24, so we can see what we budgeted and at budget meeting time frame, how much we'd spent or how much we have taken in. And then we have what we're going to propose. And you'll notice there's a note column, and you'll see, Peggy, you can go down a little further. You see the expenses and we have the lines for the expenses, but you'll see, you could stop there, thank you. You can see under, whatever that line is, expansion and mentoring, no, it couldn't be, rules and bylaws. We print those every other year on the odd years. Or you see down in leadership development, when we have new incoming state chapter officers, we do a leadership training. So that's every other year. So that was one of the things when I took over as finance chair, I had the hardest time keeping track of, do we have to pay that now or do we have to pay that whenever? And so I've made those notes and can pass this on. So what the treasurer does, she has this for the current budget planning session. And so she has the 22-23 stuff filled in. She works on the 23-24 information as she pays her bills. So when it comes time to do our budget meeting, we have that data that can be shared with the finance committee. And so that may change for you a little bit in terms of what line items you guys want at your state. And there's another one that is created. We don't need to pull up, Peggy, because it's very similar to this one that you can use as a chapter level one too, because that will look a little different. I know at our chapter, it's definitely not as involved as the state, and the state obviously isn't as involved as the international as well. We invite all of our state officers. Our president is on the committee, but the rest are ex officio, just so they have an understanding of what is happening. So as they go through their process, they know what they have to spend, but also if they become the president, and because most of ours move up through the chairs, they have a better idea of the budget by the time they become president. And you'll notice at the bottom of the estimated expenses, if Peggy could go down, there is right there at 19, line 19, there is an other line, which ties to that miscellaneous piece. And I know for us and in Maine, we have some money that's been given to us that we've put into an account that we get the dividends from. We actually have a couple of lines in that money that we spend that are contingency. So if we go over with our with a particular area, we have some contingency money spent that can come out of those funds if we needed to. Peggy, can you click on the other tab that's there that says budget presenting? What I do when I present the budget is I give them what was budgeted in 2022-23, and then what is budgeted or what we're proposing in 2024. And you'll see the asterisks, and that tells them we've added a few lines in the last couple of years to make it clearer for people where our money's coming and going. And then a couple of those asterisk lines, I'm going to bring mine up so I can go down and look because I can never remember what they say. If it's an increase, I have one asterisk. If it's a decrease, I have two. And sometimes I'll make notes as to why, but I definitely talk to them about it when I take the budget to our executive committee. And so these will be available to you so that you can just change your lines. The formulas are there, so it adds it all up and does all the subtraction and stuff for you, which makes it a whole lot easier because I've been at budget meetings where everybody's got calculators and we all come out with different numbers. The spreadsheet is really helpful for that piece. So that was what I was going to share with you. I know it seems kind of fast, but if there are some questions, I can answer those or we can move on.
Let's go ahead, and if we have any questions, we can probably do about 3 or 4 minutes if somebody has a question or two. Thank you for sharing.
There was a question about someone asked, when's the recommended time or month for finalizing the budget and getting it approved? Does it vary from chapter to chapter?
So I would say that depends upon what is in their rules and bylaws. For us, I have to have a budget ready to present to the executive board at our spring convention, which is usually the end of April. So if our convention were in early April, I'd have to have that budget ready to go for that meeting. So I would say that is dependent upon what the state expects.
Another question was if the spreadsheet would be available online, and the person who asked would like to have one to use in her chapter.
I have
Yeah.
one, both a state and a chapter one, we can post into the, we can post in the, hold on, I'm having a brain freeze, base camp.
Base camp.
Or state, and then the state
Right.
treasurers could share that with their chapter treasurers. Or Peggy, can we put those in where chapter treasurers can get it?
Certainly, we can find a place on the website under resources. That particular one may end up under something like Chapter Connect. So you have to log in and go to Chapter Connect to get access. I'm not completely comfortable just throwing it out there
Okay,
to the general, but we can certainly put it in what we call behind the login. And then once you download it and use it, I don't think Mary's claiming any copyright on that or anything. So it's free to use once you get it, but we will keep it behind the wall just to.
yeah, to be honest, it was made on a Google Doc and then a Google spreadsheet, and then I saved it as a Office, as a whatever that's called, for Power, not a PowerPoint, whatever the spreadsheet is for Word and Office.
Excel.
Yes,
Thank
thank you.
Or any other questions? Okay, hearing none, let's go on. Diana Haskell is going to share a summary page with us. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm wondering if we can get that pulled up, Peggy.
Trying to. That was the one that's OSO. Is that correct? Says
That's correct.
OSO. Yeah, I just had it open.
So single page.
Yeah, I just opened it trying to be prepared, and now I don't see it on my. Let me try and open it again. Oh, there it is. Okay. Never know where they're going to pop up.
Yes, it's up. It's up. Unfortunately, it looks like it has moved to 2 pages, but what this does, those that's taking the information that you saw from Mary's worksheet that she has done in Maine, and most of you use some form of a worksheet. And this is now taking that worksheet and getting it ready to present both at the budget process approval and then reporting on the budget and your actual expenses during the year. And this is the model that Ohio uses. And the reason we do not, of course, take a worksheet to the budget process approval, whether that's at your executive board meeting or through some other form as prescribed by your bylaws at the state level or your rules at the chapter level, is that it's too cumbersome. And it's also too difficult to manage, as Peggy talked about. The management part of the budget is just as important as the development of the budget. So in this case, instead of creating multiple lines, we aggregate the information in Ohio. We use the note section when we are presenting the budget. This happens to be a report that was made in December for Ohio. But you can see that the revenue lines are just, in this case, 6 lines, not many more than that. And it assumes, based on all the information that Peggy gave us about the budgeting process, that we have looked previously and we have arrived at a dollar amount that seems reasonable as we make our projections for revenue. And I think the revenue, as Peggy said, is one of the trickiest ones because our revenue is really dependent upon membership. And as we are declining, we're kind of needing, as fiduciary, our fiduciary responsibility leads us to look at what are those percentages of decline in membership so that we can be more accurate in our projections. In Ohio, I think we've, luckily done a fairly good job of projecting where we are. We under budgeted, as Peggy suggested, and we have a few more dollars. And of course, the year isn't over yet. As you move down to expenses, and then I list the total revenue, of course, when I make my report. As you look at the expenses, and I'm just going to kind of first talk about this as the budgeting process. administrative expenses are those expenses, and we itemize those in our worksheets, but we don't itemize them when we come to the budget process. These are the dollars that are spent that are required to manage the organization, regardless if there's 1 member or 3,000 members or 4,000 members. These are your expenses related to any contracts that you have, any insurance, any bank fees, your CPA expenses, or your filing expenses, payroll expenses, etc. Program services are the mission-driven part of the budget. So this is everything that's affiliated with Delta Kappa Gamma. This is everything that's affiliated at your chapter level. These are your committees. These are the ways in which you create philanthropy and create contributions to others. Your attendance at whether that's the international conference or the upcoming whatever upcoming state meetings you have, you'll notice that we are using large aggregate numbers purposefully. I don't want to itemize who is going to that conference. That'll all be done in the notes. How do we engage members? What are the resources that we use? Whether that's websites, letter, app, Chapter Connect, whatever it is. Those kind of expenses are there. Any supplies that we have to run the organization, it's again, member driven and DKG driven, and other donations. So the total expenses are listed as we've kind of done the budget process. So from that budget process, then as Peggy said, your next step is reporting. So we report, of course, at every meeting at the state level, and chapters report at every meeting. The chapters come together. And Peggy, if you could go back up to the top of the worksheet, what you see is that our budget first is the available fund budget, which is what we're really talking about when we budget. That's what we're prescribed to do by Constitution. We're also prescribed to hold a scholarship fee for each member, whether at the chapter level or the state level. And then at the state level, you are required to have an available fund reserve or a permanent fund. And then in the case of Ohio, we have some board designated dollars. That's primarily in this year for expansion. So in order to show all of those expenses, all of that revenue and all of those expenses, I've chosen to use columns to help identify the differences between what has been budgeted, what is required to be held, whether it by the board or whether it by Constitution. So those are our actual numbers. And then when you get to expenses, you find the same line items. Again, the available fund is there, and then your scholarship, the fund reserve, and then of course the board designated amounts. On the single page, I also show, and Peggy, if we can go down to the bottom, that's our activity. That's money in, money out. But then we want to also show with each reporting our position. Where are we? Need it just a little bit. Where are we? Our statement of financial position on this date. So I list our checking account. I list our money market, our savings. That's all monies without restriction. Those are dollars that are available to be spent. Board designated reserve was for our chapter expansion project, of which we have not spent all of it. There's some of it left. And our available fund reserve, which is restricted, and that's held in the case of Ohio in an investment account. And then the remaining dollars of our investment account, and you can think of that as savings, or you can think of it as assets. We have prepaid expenses, as most states do, and those are listed. And of course, we have liabilities, which most states do. So at the end of the day, you can see the budget, money's in and out, and you can also see the dollars that are available for the state organization in this case, or the chapter organization that are not encumbered, that are part of your assets and your liabilities. So this is an alternate way to report that's simple, easy to understand, and provides all the data that might be needed. And thank you.
Diana, thank you. And looking at our time, if we can go on, Peggy, to the request for payment or the reimbursement sheet, I believe is how I stated it, and talk about that right quick, and then we'll address questions, because I do want to be respectful of everybody's time. The sheet that I'm going to present to you comes from the state of Tennessee, and we've had it for many years, and it has worked beautifully. It is interactive. And it's great because the ladies can fill it out and send it to the president for approval or their committee chair. And then the president sends it on to the treasurer. The way it works in Tennessee is if you're a committee member and each committee has an X amount of dollars to spend. And if you, let's say I as a committee member spend $20, then I would fill out this sheet. I would send it to my committee chair. She has to sign off on it because you always want the chairs of the committees to be aware of what's being spent from that committee budget. Then it goes to the state president. She signs it, and only then does it go to the treasurer, and she will pay it. And the treasurer, of course, keeps a record of every single committee and their budget, and to make sure that they're not over. And if they are over, then that's president discretion of whether it comes, the $5 comes out of miscellaneous or comes out of that individual's pocket. I have had to, as state treasurer, tell people that your committee's over, so you know that's on you. But the top, they just fill out what the event was for and the date, where the event happened, and then their particular position, whether it's committee member, second vice president, president, whatever. Then we have a section for travel expenses, and we have actually put in the amount that Tennessee pays per mile. And of course, that varies from state to state, but it's great because this sheet automatically calculates everything. Then lodging, if there's meals, or if they needed to spend the night for something, and something else that might come under lodging. And then other expenses, and these are primarily like office expenses if you're buying supplies needed for a particular event, gifts that would be like when we have our international rep come to our state convention, that would be considered a gift. Honorarium, we have 3 positions that we pay an honorarium to yearly, and so that would be listed there. And once again, the page calculates itself, which is terrific. And then down at the bottom, all the information about where to send the payment to. And where it says person requesting, let I as a committee member, but I would have to send that on to the committee chair. She would have to sign it. The president has to sign it before the treasurer gets it and writes the check. So, but it's a great working sheet, and much like Diana's, as far as it's a summary, it's not specific. You know, every chapter or every committee is not listed. It's general topics, but we do have other under each heading. So if there's something that should go under travel, but it's not specifically listed, or under lodging or under other expenses, it can be written in. And that way everybody can go back to this sheet and see specifically what was being reimbursed. So, but it has worked beautifully in Tennessee, and it's, I love it because it is interactive and it calculates itself. So there's no error in calculation. And it also gives a written, you know, we can go back and pull out any sheets and say, yes, so-and-so did request this on a certain date. This was paid by, and on check so-and-so. So it's a great piece for the treasurer, as well as the state president, or if you would even want to use it at the chapter level, the chapter president can pull it out and say what has been requested for payments and what has been reimbursed. So it's just, it's a paper trail. So,
Nancy, one more thing is receipts are required to be attached to
okay,
it.
excuse me. Thank you, Diana. I do appreciate that. Yes, receipts do have to accompany the request payment. You can't just request it without showing the receipt. Thank you, Diana. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I want to talk quickly about the summarizing. Part of any good financial statement really should have some summaries of some numbers. Otherwise I should just email you all the check register and let you read that. Because really the purpose of this is to organize things in a functional way that makes sense logically, and listing every single payment individually sometimes provides too much data and then overwhelms, and you don't really get to see the forest because you're so busy looking at the trees. So when we talk about how we put things into categories, that's one of the reasons we do that. I mean, today electronically, I could email all of you a copy of every single check that we send out from headquarters, but what good would that information really do you without knowing how to summarize it and where to put it? And that's a big part of the treasurer's job. On the international level, our budget, and I inherited this when I started and I thought it was brilliant, and I still love it to this day. On our working copy of our budget, every single line has notes next to it, specifically talking about what that line encapsulates. Could be postage, and we'll talk about this is office postage, because we have all kinds of postage. We mail out store orders, and that's a different kind of postage, and it goes in a different place. So it enumerates for me as I'm going through year to year and looking at line items what's supposed to be in there, and maybe I need to add a line because I have too much now in that account, or maybe I need to delete a line because we're not really using that anymore. But that notes portion, if you can begin to derive some of that as well and include that at least on your copies to yourself, I think you'll find that saves you a lot of time in the future, because you don't have to go back and look at, okay, where did we put this last year? Well, it's right there in the notes what we put in there last year.
Nancy, a participant has asked if they are able to receive a copy of that document.
This was posted as well.
Okay.
You could also, well, yes, it'll be posted as well.
Okay.
So yeah, be happy for you too. And then your state or chapter can write it up however you need it to be. If there's another line item or something that you need to add or delete. So absolutely. We just have just a couple minutes. Is there, Sheila, are there any specific questions or the question that's been asked many times that we can address? Or ladies?
No,
Okay.
no, I haven't seen anything. It did say there were a couple messages in the chat, but now I can't seem to find them. So.
Okay, well, Sheila, thank you so much. Ladies, does anyone have a question? Oh, okay.
What is Basecamp?
Basecamp is a tool we use internally at International, and we use it with all of our committees, all of our boards, and it's I don't know what you call it, a chat app. It's actually a project management application, but it has on it sort of a bulletin board where we can put up notices. And then it has, a message board where we can send messages about specific topics. It's just a tool we use internationally. And so on the committee, when we're talking about Basecamp, that is the project management tool we're using as a committee. But we will also, and every state organization treasurer has a Basecamp that they've been invited to join as a project. So we put documents for state organizations in that. We will also generally, if it's going to the state, and definitely if it needs to be available to local chapters, you're going to find them on our website. Most of those will appear under Treasurer's Resources, but know that there are some that are under your login that you won't see if you don't log in. So if you're looking for a specific form and it's treasurer related, go to the DKG website, log in, and then look for your forms, because there are some that are on the login side that you won't find on the general side. If you don't know how to log in, and it happens, or you've forgotten your login, We have a chat. When the office is open, there's a chat. So that's basically from 7:30 in the morning till 6:30 in the evening Central Time. Someone is monitoring that. We also have staff that, I guess, for fun, I can't figure out why they do it, will sometimes monitor that on the weekends or whatever. When you go to the website and you look on the chat, if the chat's closed, you will know whether the chat is open or closed. You can email us at any time, and we can forward them to you by or call us if you, in terms of if you're trying to reset your password to log into the website. Most of the staff can assist you in doing that. So that is a really easy process. Chat, call are probably the two best ways to do it. But to get immediate assistance, you need to do that while we're open.
And also-
Nancy, someone asked, on the request for payment form, is the president the only required signature?
No, the person requesting the payment is their signature is required. If I'm a committee member, then in the state of Tennessee, it has to go to the committee chair and her payment, or excuse me, her signature is required. Then it goes to the state president.
And that, to reemphasize, that needs to be adapted to whatever the rules are in your state.
Right.
For example, at international level, all travel reimbursements, every single one of them is approved by the president because that's the policy in our Constitution. There are a lot of other expenses that are approved by the executive director and I, as long as they fall within the budget. But so you really need to look at what your state's rules are and know what those are. And if you're not sure, then you need to have that conversation either with the past treasurer or your current treasurer or current executive leadership, or start calling friends. But there should be somewhere in your rules and bylaws the process for approving budgets and approving actual reimbursements.
Okay, ladies, I have after 11, so we're going to close our meeting. But before we do, I do want to let you know that Peggy, as well as everyone on the International Finance Committee, we are available via email. If you go to the international web, we're all listed under committees and our emails are attached. So feel free to contact us that way. And we're always here to serve you. That's our bet. We love to do that, and that's what one of our main goals is to help you in your position. And we want to thank you so much for joining us today. As soon as this has been edited, we will post it on the web, and we will let you know that it's been posted. And we'll also let you know where all the worksheets are posted, so you can go directly to that. Our next Zoom meeting will be Saturday, April the 6th at 9 o'clock Central Standard Time. And we will send out a reminder and a Zoom link closer to that day. And I have to tell you, I'm very excited because that is the week that the International Finance Committee meets in Austin to prepare the budget to be presented this summer. So we will actually, you're going to get to see the whole committee sitting together, see how we work. And so I'm really excited about that. But we want, as a committee, we want to thank you so much for all that you do. And please know that we appreciate each and every one of you very much. And please remember that we are here to serve you. So if there's any topic that you want to see us talk about, anything we can help you with, please don't hesitate to contact us. And happy spring. I hope you all get through winter with a breeze. So you all take care, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your spending your Saturday morning or afternoon, evening, wherever you are with us. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.